Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good
Uh,
afternoon.
Hi. Hi.
yeah, we are in this panel discussion on how much dollar would it take to turn China green. So, if you look at the program, there's no agenda at all. So we felt that among the panelists, we felt that we could take some freedom in terms of curating the sub themes for the panel discussion today. And I hope you'll learn something from it, and at the same time, we'll learn from all the participants as well from your feedback. So if you look at the title, there are three main things that come out. One is how much dollar. So we are talking about what is the financial capital involved. The second is China. China is involved. The third theme is green, right? So we will focus on these three themes. Let's start at the first one. Let's talk about the amount of money required to make China turn green. Now, if we talk in terms of money, the dollar value, we are referring to financial capital. So we are looking at it in a very siloed manner. Okay. So if you look at it that way, does looking at financial capital make sense from an uh, environmental or climate change point of view? Does it make sense? So I'm going to pose this first sub-theme question to the panelists, including myself, and I would like the Sau Kwan and Iris to share their opinions on should making a transition to a greener or cleaner environment, should it entirely be based on financial P&L or financial capital? Can we talk about other possible definitions of capital as well, like social capital, biological capital, natural capital, and things like that, before we talk about the financial dollar value? Okay. So what do you think, Iris?
I think the first thing is that, of course, financial capital is very, very important because it is really the amount spent on green projects in China, for example, in China. Without this measurement, how can you really compare between among countries and also within China among every cities, every provinces? Without this monetary value, it is very difficult to set a benchmark. Yeah, social and biological and nature cost is also important, but how to measure them? It is really difficult. For example, you can measure the amount of CO2 emission reduction, how many tons of standard coal, but is this enough? Is this just what we need? Is it just CO2 emission reduction, or we need more than CO2 emission reduction? So there are lots of things. I think after all, it will become a holistic monetary value. For example, if we have a carbon market, carbon capture, which is also in dollar value, then we will have a more holistic view.
Okay, thank you, Iris. How about you, Sau Kwan?
Thank you. I would like to share, some numbers, because it depends on, who you ask and how they define the so-called, capital cost, to really, to turn, China green per se. So, for example, Goldman, did, and, a forecast, given, our president, make a commitment by, 2060, China will be carbon neutral per se. So according to Goldman, they estimate at least takes around 16 trillion US by 2060 to achieve the carbon neutral. From our own government agencies per se, that's the National Reform and Development Council. They estimate about 20 billion. So Goldman is 16, and our council is 20 trillion, US. So people can say relatively safe to say it's ranging of 16 trillion to 20 trillion US to do that. So that's the cost. Most of the cost, also, according to, in our investment, areas. So it's really, we'll go to the renewable, energies, infrastructure, so far and so on. It's a cost, but also an investment opportunities to the society, to China, to the market per se. So I would say, one side is one side of the coin, this is, really, a big initiatives, but on the other side, it is also full of opportunities.
Yeah, it's a good point mentioned by both of you. I think from Iris' perspective, eventually the capital has to be looked at from a holistic perspective. That means it must combine the natural capital, the biological capital, the social capital, as well as the financial capital, with the financial capital being easily measured compared to the rest and easily compared as well. As for Sau Kwan's perspective, I think the theme from what you have said, let's say we are going towards a greener transition or greener change in the environment for every country, even including China. A lot of the funds would have to be spent on infrastructure, especially on renewable energy sources. Renewable energy sources is unlike traditional sources like coal, carbon, coal, fossil fuel, oil, gas, and things like that. Because the traditional infrastructure for transportation, whether it's the oil tankers, whether it's by railway, whether it's by pipelines, they are all established. It is as if when a country goes green, it has to spend a lot of money on new infrastructure that has never been developed before. So, and even for investment groups or private investors, when they think about infrastructure, we are talking about a huge amount of dollar. So I think that point is very good. Now, what is unusual about the going green is that at the same time, not only the world has focused a lot on the carbon markets because it's easily understood and measured, and it's a follow up from the Kyoto Protocol where carbon trading used to be the established route by which people measure the greenhouse gas emission. But now we know that the holistic nature is involved. So it also means that the mindset or the management of the companies would have to change in terms of management, the board of directors, because now you can't just consider what is emitted in terms of the greenhouse gases or carbon emission. You need to consider how you transform the business model into a greener one. That means you have to talk about waste management, pollution, and things like that. And we know that when a city is inundated with a lot of pollution, the health of the individual and the society will weaken. They will fall sick more often. They will apply for leave and things like that. That has a financial cost to each company. So, in a sense, I would say that the holistic nature of climate change includes pollution as well. So, we have to consider uh, those things that are below the radar, which we obviously sometimes may neglect. We are just talking about renewable energy, which focuses on the carbon emission. So, what are the things that the financial sector can play to invest in those things like waste management or pollution control that can complement the reduction in greenhouse gas emission? Uh, Either of you can start.
Yeah, I think that um, on this front, when financial institutions issue a green bond or create a green loan, there should be a set of clearer and measurable indicators in it. So I understand that for now there is a set of measurements, but those measurements are really just like what we have discussed, really around the project itself, and it is not really about the issuance or the loan drawdown entity. So to really include this, I think we have to have a clear set of measurements for bond issuance and also green loan borrowers. This is very difficult, I think, and this set of measurements has to be comparable worldwide, not just in within China or around Asia. We have to have a holistic, a good measurement for a worldwide standard.
Yeah.
But how to do this is a very, very big question mark. And are there any costs like interest costs that we can add to it if the issuance entities is not really up to standard, but they really want to issue a green bond? So there are a lot of questions created from this.
Sure. I think it's a good point. Sau Kwan?
I think that what Iris mentioned is one perspective. The way I see it, when you're talking about the investment community, the capital markets per se, how to really drive people's behavioral change, to incorporate more of the so-called the green themes or ESG per se. I would say instead looking at the fund managers, investment managers, I would say it's really the asset owner can really move the dial because they drive the demand. Once there's the demand, service providers such as security firms, investment managers, they will follow and accommodate or satisfy their clients per se. So the drivers in my opinion here should start with the asset owners such as central banks, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds. They have the so-called say in what they really want their so-called investments and the standards. I think that's that's the so-called the first step. And in terms of how to really get closer to the global practices per se. So now I can share with our observations, our experience locally in from China perspective. Prior to 2017, I would say close to none, maybe just handful of institutions in China joined the PRI, UN PRI. But as we are speaking, end of last year, there were approximately 84 institutions, local PRC institution, join PRC already, and three of them are asset managers. So that means that asset managers, the market participants, really incorporate the so-called responsible investment, concepts, practices in their investment process. I think that's very good, first step per se. So with that, we have seen a much more ESG types responsible investment funds in the market. As of end of last year, there were total approximately 52 billion US mutual funds labeled as green or ESG funds. Prior to 2017, probably close to none. So things are changing. Like in China. So going back to what Iris mentioned earlier. In fact, look at the green bonds issued by China. 2021, it was approximately 95 billion US.
Correct.
And some analysis, some people did a comparison. Although so-called, we label it as green bonds, but compared to the so-called international standards, 2/3 of them, do not meet the same standards, as the so-called global players used to. Per se. I don't know, which one is, right or wrong. Okay, but at least, there's a very, very different standards, here. But, but I would like to focus on, starting with not much happening to at least now at least 1/3 of, what we issued last year, 2021, meet the global or international standards. This is a progress have been made. So, we should focus on the so-called the positive side. So, people's behavior are changing. The capital market is really, getting to to the so joining a much bigger global community in the green in the so-called environment conscious arena. So
Correct.
that's what he said.
Yeah.
May
I yeah,
may
sure.
I echo a little bit on Sau Kwan? Um, in fact, green bond issuance is, although it's large, it has a larger brother, which is green bond issue, green loan drawdown in China, which is amounted to $2.3 trillion. So, how much of this are really greenwashing? We don't know. But as Sau Kwan said, at least some of them is actually following the international standards, and it is a big step moving forward because we have calculated that only for the transportation sector, China needs $11 trillion to get it net zero carbon emission for the transportation sector. So it is a huge amount. Of course, we have 40 years to go, but we need to start.
Correct. I the good thing is both of you have mentioned the one key trend being the momentum, that there's a greater awareness, especially in China and some of the developing countries as well, or emerging frontier economies, because even the global signatories to the Paris Agreement is increasing, as you can see. And but at the same time, there is the issue that has to be careful because there's a lack of standardization in different regions with regards to what is defined as a green bond, what is defined as a sustainability linked bond, and things like that, right? Or even green loans. So right now, the standard seems to be the EU taxonomy, but I understand that China and the EU have been working out some common standardized taxonomy, and as you can see, it's still a work in progress. As you can see, during the Ukraine war, just prior to the Ukraine war, the EU taxonomy, the EU mentioned that they decided to keep natural gas and nuclear in the taxonomy, right? So it has a different, that may have a different kind of perception to other countries that look at nuclear as being dangerous, or it shouldn't be a kind of renewable source of energy and things like that. So obviously, the standards are still evolving, and until the standards have evolved into something that has global acceptance, there suspect that there will still be cases of greenwashing or ESG washing and things like that, right? So as you can see, our panel here illustrate one area of sustainability. If you look at our our ratios, right, we exhibit diversity on this panel. Two of you outnumber me as a single person. Oh, sorry, I'm just talking about diversity here. Sorry. Okay. So usually diversity is sometimes included as a measure of sustainability, inclusion, but D&I and things like that. So it depends on what definition is used. And sometimes we have to nail down to the definition as well. So now let's go on to the next screen. Let's talk about China. Now, China has a very unusual uh, facet in the sense that when I think about China, I'm reminded of a movie, an old Hollywood classic called The Three Faces of Eve. So this particular woman had three characters: good, bad, and evil. So it's like in the case of or the good, bad, and ugly, a very famous Western movie. But if you look at China, by virtue of its humongous population, it is the biggest polluter in the world generally, not per capita, but in terms of numbers. But yet, it is also the greatest producer of green energy, whether it's electric vehicle, electric batteries, and things like that. So in China, it has this dichotomy. If you take into account the overall holistic capital or benefits that China can engender from its green energy production versus what is dirty or wasteful from its pollution, then you can see that there's opportunities for offsetting in that sense. So that would also impact on the kind of value, financial value, that is required to turn China green. It's not that China is starting from base zero. They are already quite advanced in certain sectors. So I would say that that green initiative that China started a decade ago or something like that, it will definitely have some impact on the financial P&L required to turn it green, completely green by 2060. So, what is your opinion on that? So, I've been asking Iris first. So maybe now I'll ask Sau Kwan to share your opinion.
Sure. I think, you put it, in a fair way. So, once, one hand, China did, quite a lot of so-called pollutions, and now they are cleaning up. So, there's a Chinese saying. So, if, you have, I'm translating into English, you have to have the so-called basic needs before you can think of anything. So, prior to the 80s, per se, prior to, China's open door policy. So a lot of people still in poverty per se. So, since, 1978, up to 2020, the GDP growth is almost, 10% every year in the past 40 years. So we have, came from a long journey, and up to, probably maybe, 20 years ago, we could, afford, to really, do something beyond the basic needs. That means, okay, clear up, the environment, the mess we made, and, catch up, with the rest of the world. So in that front, China has done, quite a lot to really, so-called to turn the China green. So just give you some numbers, to support, my claim. So in the past 15 years, ended, around 2017, China, has the most, lived area in the world, has improved, that, taken, by, by NASA, the pictures. So it really, covered, 10.6% of the areas. The second is really, India is only 6%. The global, in that, the global, average is in that, 15 years is only 2%. So, it shows, in an objective way, NASA took the picture, the satellite pictures, China is, doing the catch up to really, make up, what they had done in the past. So I think in that regard, we should bear with, the market while, they're going through the so-called growing pain per se.
Correct. Yeah. Iris, anything
Um,
to
I think I need to explain a little bit on this. China, in fact, is increasing its pollution. For example, from 6% of CO2 emission of the world in 1970s to 27% of the world's CO2 emission in 2017. So it highlights the development stage of the economy. But is it really big for China on clean energy? In fact, this is not. In 2019, clean energy increased 11%, but it is still only 15% of energy consumption and lower than the world average. And for example, take another example, the number of EVs as a ratio, as a percentage of total cars in China is only 1.9%, 1.9%. But it doesn't mean that China is not working hard on this sector. I think that we have already seen that China is investing a lot in this sector, And even with 1.9% of EVs over total cars, it means that other economies are not catching up with China on new energy or new energy applications. So China, by the numbers, looks small on applying new energy or clean energy, but others look even smaller than China. And in terms of investments, China is now a pioneer in terms of new energy investments and also battery investments and also in EVs production and new cells of EVs. So all this means that yes, China is was pollutive once, but now they are leading the change, although the change is just at the beginning of the cycle.
Yeah. I think again both of you raise a very interesting point, especially with me having limited knowledge about China. The thing is that if you look at the past industrial revolution, especially after the Second World War, in the developed economies, the G7 or whatever, you will find that a lot of the countries and people, they use plastics a lot. You know that plastic is found in everything we consume today, in your glass, in your cups, in your watches, your leather. There'll be some plastic, microplastic in it, but yet they are producing it based on the fossil fuel industry, because uh, plastic is made from a group of chemical compounds called alkenes that come from the fossil fuel industry. All right, and they spread around the world. And the bad thing is plastic cannot be broken down. Once it's built, it's a new material, it cannot be broken down. That means it'll forever stay in the environment. Although scientists are trying to get rid of it or to break it down by enzymes and things like that. However, what it means is that the developed economies today have polluted the world with a lot of plastic use. And if whether you're in America, in Europe, it is very hard to remove the plastic. So one of the things that is not captured among the developing countries, including China, I would say, is that the use of such products which derive upstream from the fossil fuels are never taken into account. When somebody talks about carbon emission, they are thinking about factories that show smoke, black smoke polluting the air, but they are not looking at, again, some areas which are using a lot of fossil fuel, driving the demand, continued demand for fossil fuel. So perhaps in those industries in China which are green, they are already practicing recycling, reusing the plastic in many ways. So in some countries, the plastic is being combined with the development of new concrete materials. It could be used for construction or whatever. So that could make a new industry altogether as well, right? It could generate a new industry. So I wish sometimes the financial sector and the EU taxonomy or the global standards talk about those areas that are involved in the circular part of the business, not just the asset owners, but the assets and companies they finance as well. So that would give you a more equal, holistic picture of the whole perspective. Do y'all finance? Do y'all invest in products like that?
I can't comment on what ING loans are. Sorry.
Oh, but in general, I mean, like, what do you think that the financial sector, whether it's the asset owners or the banks doing the financing, do they invest in such circular type of business model as well on the management side, the waste management, the pollution control, the plastic removal, recycling, and things like that?
I think in general, banks are interested because this actually not only increase the green loans percentage as per total loans, it is also brand building for banks themselves. So I think they are willing to do this. But usually, these are usually startups without really big capital background. And therefore this could be a challenge for banks.
Okay, I understand. Sau Kwan, have you come across illustration or instances in those other areas that are not on the radar of most investors or financial institution today?
I think just because we are a mutual fund managers per se,
Correct, correct. Yeah,
so we focus on the secondary market. That means for those listed companies
correct.
per se. So it doesn't come across with so-called major investment in that area. Maybe
Yeah,
as Iris mentioned, because a lot of them is really the startup, so that doesn't fall into the so-called secondary market yet.
okay,
So
okay.
I'm sure for those venture capitals, you know uh, companies, probably they would have more interest at this point.
Yeah, but it's interesting you both of you mentioned this area because I think then there's a need and there's a potential niche for microfinancing and micro investing. So it could be done through crowdfunding among the even the retail population to crowdfund such startup projects because they believe in that cause or something like that, right? And then
Yes,
if we talk about the non-fungible token, the fractional ownership that could be possible even in the private equity or venture capital world. That means instead of investing an investor investing a large amount, you can have many investors taking small micro micro shares of the new startups or things like that. So perhaps it could be something that financial institution and asset owners could potentially do. Because when I was working in Alberta in the pension fund business, we used to set up a venture capital fund together with ADIA, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, and New Zealand Super to invest in renewable energy startups. So it could be possible if you can change the behavior, not change the behavior, but persuade some of these responsible asset owners to co-invest into this area, especially in venture, which is more higher risk. But at the same time, they are doing it on a syndicated basis, so they are practicing risk diversification as well. So perhaps that we could see a new growth in this area as well, right?
yeah.
So yeah, we have gone through two-thirds of the conversation, I think. So let's talk about the last theme. The last theme is on green. So let's talk about the products and services as well. So with regards to maybe we'll start with Sau Kwan because you are the fund management company. So you would have seen in the secondary market the various opportunities and the types of products and services that could be created.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely, would love to, to share, just look at the China market as a whole, as, I mentioned at the beginning. So,
Yeah.
prior to 2017, not much mutual funds per se have a label. Yeah, I'm talking about the label. So, like peel into the details depends, which, standard, the so-called ESG standard, people use, have not much, uh, mutual funds per se, but up to end of last year, there was 52 billion US mutual funds in the public arena, and most of them are really green related. So clean energy, VE, EV, those. So definitely, this is really the so-called the trend we will be seeing in the future for quite a long time, in my opinion. So some people did forecast. So if use 52 billion as or 50 billion US as a base, and in the past few years the mean for the growth is around 50%, 50%. So in 5 years, so it could range for 400 billion to 800 billion US potential markets just for the mutual funds per se in this specific so-called green theme. So with the government, the commitment to carbon neutral by 2016, 2030, the carbon emissions, I would say like the whole ecosystem and also the investment themes, public funds per se, public mutual funds, in China per se, will have a facelift, in the coming years.
Great. Iris?
Um, I I have very little to say because I can't mention anything about the bank's products and services, but I believe that in the green loan area, we we are doing the same. We all the financial institutions for now don't like to be labeled as greenwashing, and I believe that monetary authorities, they will be looking at this, whether it is real green loan or genuine green loan or a greenwashing thing. So it is quite risky to jump into greenwashing for now. It's not like 6 months ago. 6 months ago, no one talked about greenwashing. And now, because of the boom of the green bond and green loan, everyone is talking, is this greenwashing? Is this greenwashing? So I think all the financial institutions are aware of this, and they should actually monitor it more carefully.
Yeah, but it could also mean that the consulting firms that do the accreditation of these green bonds or green instruments, they may be using their own standards. So there should be a independent. To me, I feel that there should be an independent global body that does this independent validation and verification of the ESG models, especially to kind of verify whether what has before the issuance has it gone through some robust or stringent criteria that is measurable to ensure that it strictly relates to being a green bond, a green issuance, versus the problems that we face today in SLBs, the sustainability linked bonds, where there are about 17 criteria according to the United Nations SDG principles. So sometimes if you fulfill two or three of the principles, you're okay, you're considered sustainable, right? But there could be others that are less green or more green and things like that. So perhaps we need something like a very black and white situation in terms of the standardization of the rules rather than 50 shades of green instead of 50 shades of gray, right? So what I'm trying to say is that there are different nuances in different countries, different regions, and different consulting or ratings firms, and in different, the ESG ratings are still not standardized enough. Oh, and then there's a question from the audience. The question is that China invests substantially in raw materials in the developing world. Does China have the appetite for investing in sustainability and renewable in emerging markets? What do y'all think? Of course,
Okay,
you,
can I
you can
take
answer
this?
me as well. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I think for this one, China definitely has the appetite for investing in sustainability and renewables in emerging markets because it is so-called carbon capture idea, really. So to balance off what they made, for example, pollution when they produce raw materials in the developing world. For example, country X. So if China has a site in country X producing raw materials that is very pollutive, then China should have the appetite to invest in the sustainability in that country X, because that's the first thing is that that's his responsibility. The second thing is that I think it is also good for both China and that country X, because it is China's responsibility and it's also China's investment in that country X. So I don't think that China is really irresponsible. Um, it is that because of the Belt and Road and because of Africa, there are lots of media attention saying that China is using the developing world to reduce its own pollution within China. I can't say that this is incorrect, but China also have made improvements for the livelihood in those countries and economies. And therefore, I think that China is very willing to invest in those economies' sustainability.
Sau Kwan?
I echo, Iris, points. And in fact, we do see, investors do have interest, in such, opportunities if they can find it. So, this is, I would say, happening, people are really, keen interested, in such, areas per se. Definitely, as, we mentioned earlier, the sustainability, responsible investment, trends will continue for many, many years to come.
Yeah. I also echo your 2 points in the sense that when you must have heard about smart city, smart infrastructure, right? Both of you. So when traditionally the coining of these terms, smart city and smart infrastructure, was based on advanced technology, AI, uh, artificial intelligence, machine learning, automated vehicles, and things like that. But what most people don't understand is today's technology are based on fossil fuel. The data center, if it's not driven by hydropower, it's driven by fossil fuel, by coal, by gas, by oil, or whatever. So what it means is that a lot of the technologies that we see today, whether it's in the metaverse, whether it's in AI, they are driven by fossil fuel industry. To have a truly smart city, but not just smart, but green city, you actually have to change the whole design and layout, the whole infrastructure, and that costs a lot of money. And I think China, with its Belt and Road and smart cities, are actually ahead in this area because a lot of the cities that China is building are meant not just to be smart from an IT perspective, but also to be greener, to be environmentally friendly. Although they may be new, but they are emerging, and I think they replicate it in some of the cities in the along the Belt and Road Initiative. I think in Africa, I can't remember the country, but I remember they were building a smart infrastructure urban city, which is green as well. I think in Kenya, if I'm not mistaken, but I may be wrong about the country. So I think there's a combination of the things here. It's just that we are so used of talking about smart infrastructure, smart city in terms of the IT perspective. But what most people forget is that when it comes to climate change, a total radical mindset transformation must take place because we are going to move the whole economy of the world from one traditionally based on fossil fuel to one based on so-called renewable or greener energy. And that shift is not easy for a country or for societies or for people to make that transition. Well, what do you think? We only have another 3 minutes, so we can sum it up. You can also sum up our discussion or looking at the questions as well.
I think um, we all have to every country has to play its part, not only for their own country but also for other smaller countries, other developing countries. And of course, you can say that we can rely on World Bank or other international institutions, but even that, China is one of the players, must be, to help setting up so-called smart cities or greener cities, cleaner cities, because it has invested the most advanced green tools or clean tools. So I think I want to say that the next step, which is more difficult, is carbon capture and usage. This has been invested very skinny, and very few people talk about this. But if we can do better on carbon capture and usage, it will actually speed up the whole process of being green. And we don't need to talk about 2050 or 2060 by then. We can actually cut off that 10 years from then. So carbon capture is one area that I think we must pay more attention to.
Yeah, thank you. How about you,
To
Sauka?
share, the experience, at least what we have seen in China. So there's a lot of cities in the West, of China. That means like Sichuan, those, areas, smart cities is quite, popular nowadays. And, that really shows, the demand and also the effort, the government,
Yeah.
working on
Uh,
it.
we we may be cut off, so thanks again for your contribution. Just in case we are cut off,
Okay.
but yeah, but Sau Kwan, I think right now, if we still have some time, we can look for some questions from the floor or somebody else. If
Okay.
if not, are we ending too early? Let me see. Yeah, yeah, we are. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there's a question for Iris, I think. How are China's improvement reflected with its vast use of fossil fuel and reluctance to move away from them?
Oh, actually, China is moving away from them. For example, clean energy increased 11%, but it, you can't really move very fast because the base is very huge here. You have a huge base of fossil fuels, so we can only expect that around 2030 to 2040 will have a significant energy consumption from clean energy. So it will be different landscape on energy consumption composition from now.
Yeah. Thanks, Iris. I think you make the last concluding statement. I think we are off already. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate. Nice,
Thanks.
nice chatting with you. I hope I didn't throw any surprises to either of you because I just twist the question to